Hey everyone, sorry if my energy is a bit low here today. I have syphilis. Or, you know, that other thing. It's one of the two for sure, except that it's definitely this one. I don't know why I said the syphilis thing. There's a bit of a new series that I wanted to do where I go through all the games I played in the last month and give them all a short review and rating. It doesn't have to have released in the last month, and it doesn't have to be my first time playing it. It's just everything that I press play on in the last 30 to 31 days. I was inspired by a series I saw on Carson Runquist's channel, which I really enjoyed, and one day I was like, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm gonna steal it. It lets me talk about a lot of games that I didn't feel the need or urge to make a full video about, and I think it's a fun way to keep me playing new stuff, but I may have gone a bit overboard for this first one because, well, you see, I was actually gonna do this for March, but then it turned out I played Elden Ring and only Elden Ring for the first 20 days of March, so I decided to include the last 10 in this video, which was always gonna inflate the numbers a bit, but I also had a crappy April, which meant I played a lot of games, so, yeah, there are 17 video games in this video. Actually, no, one's under embargo, so 16. Better get started. Oh my god, recording this video today was not a good idea. Quick rundown of the scoring system. I'm basing it on how much I would recommend the game. 1 is I almost universally don't recommend it. 2 is maybe some people will like it, but it's got a lot of issues. 3 is a good game that I recommend, but it's far from perfect. 4 is a great game that most people will probably enjoy. And 5 is an absolute must-play for anyone even remotely interested in the genre, and even for people who aren't. You're gonna see most games skew to this side because you all know I really try not to put myself through games that are critically panned, because unlike other creators, I value my sanity, so hopefully you'll find some cool new games to check out here. Anyways, let's just get into it. Everhood is a rhythm game that takes a lot of inspiration from Undertale. It's got quirky characters with fun names and goofy dialogue, but most importantly, it's got a really great soundtrack. Seeing as how every battle in this game is a musical face-off, those funky, boppy beats really bring it to a whole other level. The rhythm game mechanics here are pretty basic and honestly easy compared to a lot of others I've played. Even when playing on Expert, I get tripped up once or twice, but I never really get stuck anywhere. But I wouldn't say that either of those things is a hindrance, and tying it all together is a story, dialogue, and presentation that aspires to be another Earthbound or Undertale, but ultimately falls a little bit short of that goal. It's not bad, but it's not nearly as witty or weird as those games can get. It does, however, have a gameplay loop that appeals more to me personally, and I love when it goes full psychedelic. That's a real trip. It might not hit every high mark that it sets for itself, and I might not be as ecstatic about it as a lot of Steam users, but it's really good fun. It comes with great music, which really boosts the gameplay, and it'll still give you a few laughs on the way. 4 out of 5. The rebooted Shadow Warrior series feels like it's got a bit of an identity crisis. All 3 games share some common DNA, but feel pretty different to play, as if Flying Wild Hog had a really hard time pinning down exactly what they wanted to do. Despite that, each of these games are pretty fun, shut your brain off experiences, and if this franchise is to continue, I hope it builds off the ideas of 3 instead of shifting directions again, because this feels most like what the series should have been the whole time. It's a pretty short FPS campaign that'll run you about 6 to 8 hours, but it's full of pure blood, guts, and destruction. You can wall run, swing, dash, and double jump around arenas, popping heads with your sizable arsenal or slicing people up at a short range. They really found a good balance of the katana to gun combat here, and even implemented a cool new addition with finishing moves. These require you to have built up a certain amount of energy to pull off, and will heal you and give you a specific weapon to the type of enemy you killed, from an ice bomb to a fireworks launcher to a giant drill. The humor still doesn't hit for me. Cutscene transitions have an insane amount of stutter, and I had to completely zone out Lo's friend Hoji while I was playing it, but damn if this isn't a good way to burn half a dozen hours. Strong 3 out of 5. The base game of Ghostrunner is one of the most fluid and fun 3D action games that I've ever played. I go back to it pretty consistently, and I've been there for all the content updates like hardcore and arena mode, which is saying a lot. I tend not to go back to games just because a content update is dropped. I usually gotta be in the mood for it, which is why I haven't returned to Returnal after that DLC, which does look pretty awesome. That's why I was so excited for Ghostrunner Project Hell, the game's most hefty DLC yet, which introduced a new short storyline, new characters, a slightly altered moveset, and much more, but admittedly, I wasn't fully captured by it. It's by no means bad, it's still got the great action backbone, and I liked a lot of the new additions, but it felt a tad bit rushed. One of the best examples being this section of a boss fight, which was super similar to another boss in the base game, but with less flair. It was like a step backwards of the exact same fight. The second half of that fight did have a new twist, but it was small things like that which made it a bit less impactful. It took me a while to get used to how Hell played compared to Jack, specifically when it came to jumping, and while I eventually got into the new rhythm of things, the game was pretty short, so it ended shortly after, but maybe if I go back and replay it, I'll enjoy it more. It's a fine DLC addition to a really great game. I wouldn't call it a must-play like the base game is, but it's still really worth checking out, especially if you're a fan of the original. 3 out of 5. Getsufumaden Undying Moon is a game that I have a full review up for, so I'm not going to over-explain it here, but if you wanted the quickest rundown of what I said in that video, this is a game with a really gorgeous art style and phenomenal soundtrack that both shine through really well in some areas, matched with some decent gameplay and some interesting ideas, but one that's also held back by some of the more clunky elements of the moment-to-moment action and some less than ideal decisions that make progression in this roguelite more frustrating than they need to be. The goods do outweigh the bads, but I do wish that some of this could have been tightened up in the early access phase. 3 out of 5 for this one as well. I finally got around to playing What Remains of Edith Finch this month after I started properly writing my video on main characters, which I know I said I was working on like weeks ago, but it's literally just sitting there fully written and ready to be recorded and has been for weeks. I'm just taking my sweet time for some reason. The game is a lot shorter than I thought. For some reason I was expecting like 6-ish hours, but instead it's a smidge over 2, and it crams a lot into those 2 hours. I really like learning about this crazy family who all seem to be cursed to meet tragic ends, and some of the stories were really sad and captivating even when they only had a couple of minutes to work with. I'd give examples, but I don't want to give away some of the best parts of the game because I think it's worth checking out by just about everyone. It's short, and if you're on PlayStation and routinely pick up games on PS Plus that you might not get around to, then you probably already have it, so give it a go. Anyone who enjoys strong narratives will probably find a lot to love here. 5 out of 5. Tunic is another game that I've talked about already in a 60-second review, so again, I won't rehash the details, but my main takeaway was that for a player who really loves the action side of action-adventure, Tunic does a great job making me invested in the adventure side. It's just really well designed with the perfect balance of vague but still somewhat easy to follow if you're using your brain, which admittedly sometimes I'm not. When both this and Death's Door were being advertised, I found myself way more interested in the latter, and I wasn't entirely sure why people were so excited about Tunic. It didn't seem like anything special to me, but I think after playing both, I find them equal in quality for different reasons. Death's Door has the style and the faster pace and the weird characters going for it, while Tunic is cryptic and emphasizes discovery and deliberation. They're two sides of the same isometric coin, and I think they're both fantastic entries in this long-standing genre. 4 out of 5. That's 4 out of 5 for Tunic, not I mean, they're both 4 out of 5, but I only played Tunic this month. You understand. You guys know how I feel about Sekiro already, but goddamn, I don't know if I can talk enough about how I feel about Sekiro. It's FromSoft's most tightly packaged game, it's the most consistent in all of its elements, and the combat truly never gets old. When I first played the game in 2019, I started exclusively watching Sekiro-related content for a while, and I stumbled onto speedruns, and I've never had the urge to speedrun a full game before, but I really wanted to try this at some point. I'm saving it just a bit for when I start streaming, and to answer your question, I have no idea when I'm going to start streaming, because I'm just that much of an enigma. Or, you know, because I'm lazy and I don't want to, listen, I don't want to figure out how to, we'll talk about this later, okay? What was I talking about again? I'm saving it a bit for when I start streaming. I'm not going to go for the world record or anything, just a personal goal, but after beating this game again, I went through a few New Game Plus cycles and used speedrun routes to see how fast I could beat the game without cheesing any bosses, and I wound up beating my New Game Plus 5 run in under an hour. It's not that impressive in the grand scheme of things, and it not being a fresh file does make it a lot easier, but I can now beat this game 3 times in the span that it took me to beat the Chained Ogre in my first playthrough. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. 1 point for every speedrun I did this month. It took me over a decade, but I finally played Mirror's Edge and its very belated follow-up Mirror's Edge Catalyst this year, and they made a strong enough impression on me to make a whole video talking about why I wanted this series to continue. These are fun, often addicting games that might be rough around the edges, but can also pack a lot of fun level design and escape sequences, as well as some not so fun ones. I made the case that the diamond at the center of these games is worth trying to attain in a third installment, especially after parkour games have done so well, but I also can't ignore some of the less enjoyable elements that I explored in that video. Mirror's Edge, the original, gets a strong 3. Mirror's Edge Catalyst, this might anger some people. I know that this one has garnered a bit more respect over the years, but it was honestly floating between a 2 and a 3 for me, but I do think it does enough to make it a light recommendation, so I'm putting it at a 3. Listen, I wasn't kidding about how you're not going to see much of these. I almost exclusively play good games, I'm sorry. Playing Bloodborne again after a while, especially after I talked it up so much on my channel, made me have one thought immediately on starting it up. God damn, the frame pacing is bad in this game. I forgot how much of an eyesore it is at first. Also, some of the bosses are worse than I remember, and I already thought a lot of Bloodborne's bosses weren't the strongest in the series. I don't know why I thought Mikolash was just kind of annoying at first. I guess I repressed the memory of his stupid magic attack in his second phase, but man, I hate it. So given those things, you might expect me to say, my opinion on Bloodborne has dipped a little bit, but honestly, no, dude, this game is incredible. I still hate the Forbidden Woods, I still suck at making builds, which makes this whole whole game a lot more difficult than it needs to be. I still hate the spiders, and it's still my second favorite game of all time. 6 out of 5, shut up, my video, my rules. And if you don't play the Old Hunters DLC when you play this game, I will legitimately come to your house and shove my foot up your rectum. Boomerang X has also made an appearance on this channel as another fun, short, very short action experience that has a very simple, inspired, and effective twist. Combat and movement is entirely dictated by a single boomerang, and the game will have you hop, jump, skipping around everywhere in its wave-based arenas to clear out the group of baddies. It's enjoyable and replayable, not anything that'll blow your mind, but a pretty unique action experience. I would have gotten a 4, but it's kind of a side dish, so I'm gonna give it a strong 3. I finally downloaded Severed Steel after loving the demo last year, and I'm happy to report this game is baller. It's all action all the time, and it's always satisfying to dive into arenas, shoot a couple of goons, launch your gun at somebody's face, grab their weapon, and continue on your streak of mayhem. Just as it's always fun to slide past someone, slow down time, turn and riddle some bullets into them, or do a full front flip over someone and shoot them in the head. This game's options for avoiding damage and monkeying around shooting galleries makes you feel uninhibited, with the one downside being that those options can be exploited a bit easily. I played on what was called the definitive difficulty, and noticed that if I was ever struggling, I could just chain a bunch of dives, wall runs, and slides together randomly to get my health back, since you're invincible during all of those actions. It kind of took away from the purposefulness of the movement and made it a clunky get out of jail free card, especially combined with how you can absolutely abuse the slowdown time ability. Of course, you could limit yourself and not do those things, but that's not how people play games. So while I'm glad that dives and slides don't have a short cooldown so you can always pull off sweet impromptu moves, I do think that it sometimes feels like you're constantly on God mode. Still, I can't act like this wasn't a great time that I instantly replayed on completing it. 4 out of 5. The last game on this list that I've already explored thoroughly on the channel, Katana Zero is a ridiculously satisfying action platformer with a surprisingly interesting story, cohesive and inspired presentation to match, and gameplay that gets better and better the more you put into it. My video on it explored how it improves on every single replay, citing how I initially didn't like it and then came back to it way later and fell in love, and how every time I played it afterwards made me appreciate it even more, and I've seen that sentiment shared by a lot of people. Because of that, this is a bit of a tough one to put a number on, because I can't guarantee you'll like it the first time around, or maybe ever. This just might not be your thing. So while I hold Katana Zero in high regard, I think I'm gonna put it at a 4, but seriously, try this game out. Even if you had and you didn't like it, give it one more go, it'll probably be worth it. Playing Katana Zero gave me an itch for another one-hit kill game immediately after, and I wound up playing one that I've played a few times already, and one that's been in my peripheral vision for a while: Hotline Miami and Ape Out. Replaying Hotline Miami is always fun, but always a bit frustrating as well. I can't seem to escape that default tactic of abusing the enemy AI to beat levels instead of going and doing something cool, because the game takes like a 470% increase in difficulty when you do that. For a long time, I thought this was an issue of skill and it was all on me, but I think I realized this time around that the game's also kind of at fault for that. I've played and overcome tougher games, and I've spent hours and hours in one area or one boss trying to somehow will myself to victory, but I know I got better as time went on because the game was forcing me to get better instead of just banging my head into a wall. See that one example I gave when I explained Sekiro? You don't just go from 3 hours for a mini boss to 1 hour for the whole ass game without an increase in skill. But aside from the score at the end of levels, Hotline Miami doesn't ever convince you to change your ways, and it smushes you when you try to make that change for yourself. And as much as I still love it, I have to say that doesn't feel like great design to me. The fact that you can abuse enemy AI like that and the only thing stopping you is your pride, I guess. So while it's a classic, and I still think anyone interested in it should check it out, and I know a lot of people love this game, I'm gonna put it dead center, 3 out of 5. But what about the other game? Ape Out is destruction jazz. It features the minimal yet bold art style with a soundtrack that crashes and crescendos based on what you're doing. There's only 2 buttons in the whole game, grab and slam, which really emphasizes the primal nature of an ape escape. And there's still a little bit of a flexibility and strategy to how you should play despite the very bare control scheme. For example, you can grab victims' body parts and throw them to stun enemies. You can use some people as a shield or as an aim projectile. But if you're smart, you'll know to target certain enemies in groups that have a tight grip on the trigger to inflict way more damage, and you'll avoid grabbing certain enemies that, once they're shot, can have very explosive effects. The style is hands down my favorite part of the game. I love when sudden changes happen, like the lights going out with the colors changing and everything getting all spooky, ooh. And the title cards at the beginning of each level never get old. Plus the fact that the menu is a bunch of discs discs, with each one being split into side A and side B. A lot of small stuff like that makes this game really awesome. I was sometimes longing for a few more tools to use, or even a little side shuffle dodge to make attacks more engaging, but it's still really fun in its stripped down form, and the presentation is killer, 4 out of 5. And closing out like we started with a psychedelic rhythm game, I've been having a really good time with Thumper. I'm pretty early on in the game, and I haven't tried the VR mode yet, but it's yet another title that gets that things don't need to be complicated to be good. It's fast, crazy, and borderline demonic, with a far different soundtrack than you see in most rhythm games, but it does a really great job putting you into the mood and making you feel accomplished for completing even objectively easy sections. It's one of those games that you look at and think, man, how could I possibly keep up with this? It's so fast-paced and intense. And then you play it, and you still don't know how you're keeping up with it, but you are, and that's pretty sweet. So yeah, we went through this whole video, and I only gave games 3s to 6s, sue me. I really enjoyed making this video, despite the fact that I'm actively dying while recording it. It was a lot of fun, and hopefully this is going to be a monthly thing, especially if you guys are receptive to it. If you have any suggestions of what I should play next month, leave them in the comments. I can't guarantee I'll get to them, but I'll definitely take them into account. Right now I plan on playing the Half-Life games, the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Stride next month, among other things. Shout out to Shades of Grey Matter, by the way, for putting that last one on my radar. I don't know what your actual name is or what you look like, but I'm gonna assume it's this, and if you tell me different, I will just refuse to believe you. Thanks for watching, like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you all next time, hopefully in better health. Peace.